listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
While science pursues fact, magic accesses the quantum level, bridging random facts to form truth. As long as science and magic remain separate and polarized, the truth cannot be known. I'm Wilda Wieka. Join me on the Science of Magic radio program dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. During each episode, I'll be speaking with experienced and respected scientists and mystics. From astrologers to astronomers, from medical doctors to shaman, the scientific method to dowsing and intuition, we will weave together information from seemingly divergent practices to promote unity and enlightenment. Join me, Wilda Wieka, and the Science of Magic right here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Jeff Gilson didn't go out looking for adventure, danger, or the answers to most of the controversial political intrigues of the past 30 years. But he found all three when he began investigating the mysterious death of his close friend, Margaret Thatcher's favorite speechwriter. Just an ordinary guy living in a small, sleepy suburb 20 miles outside of London, Jeff's questions provoked a powerful response on both sides of the Atlantic. He was shot at, warned off by the CIA, and formed a close bond with one of Israel's most notorious intelligence officers. Relive Jeff's gripping adventure in his fast-paced book, Maggie's Hammer. Peel away the layers of establishment deception and discover, as Jeff did, that his friend was an assassin with British intelligence, that Great Britain has been America's secret hitman for the past 30 years, and that Princess Diana was not the target in that Parisian tunnel. All of this and more when you visit www.maggieshammer.com and find the link to buying this explosive book online. More and more ordinary people feel they no longer have control of their lives. Jeff fought back. He asked the difficult questions. He set out to redesign his own destiny, and you can do the same using Maggie's Hammer as your guide. Don't waste a moment. Buy it today. Visit www.maggieshammer.com.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. My email address, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And our main website, where you can listen to the X-Zone 24/7, 365, is www.xzoneradiotv.com. Here's a question for you, X-Zone Nation. Did the U.S. government fund secret monkey virus experiments with cancer cells to murder Fidel Castro? Did a sitting president order the death of a loyal housewife? Was a respected professor and scientist murdered by the CIA to cover up the secrets about JFK assassination? How are all of these allegations connected? Well, these are questions and other explosive topics that are discovered in books published by TrineDay Publishing, led by Kris Millegan, our guest this hour. This is a company that is passionately committed to our freedom of speech, specializing in publishing and publicizing suppressed books that reveal the inner workings and dark deeds of our leaders throughout the decades. An historic event came to New Orleans, presented by TrineDay with Conscious Community Events and JFK Historical Group, the first annual Lee Harvey Oswald Conference. Oswald's Summer of Secrets, New Orleans, and the JF Kennedy Assassination took place on October 16 to 18. What was Lee Harvey Oswald actually doing in New Orleans during the summer of 1963? What about David Ferry, Dr. Mary Sherman, and the Garrison trial? Well, joining me now this hour to help answer these questions is the publisher of TrineDay Publishing, Kris Millegan. And Kris, welcome to the X Zone.
Well, thank you very, very much for having me on.
You know, Kris, I love the books you publish.
Well, it's, I want a better future for our children.
Well, my hat is off to you, my friend, and let's get right into this topic because we're coming into November. Everybody talks about the JFK assassination in November. You had this event, I believe it was held October 16th to 18th. And the first annual Lee Harvey Oswald Conference. Tell me about it.
Well, it was very historic. We had most of the leading researchers. We had Jim Mars, who wrote Double Cross.
Great guy.
That was the basis for JFK.
Mm-hmm.
We had Joan Millen, who wrote about the Garrison investigation. We had Judith Ferry Baker, who lived there in New Orleans and was a part of that project and girlfriend of Lee Harvey Oswald. We had Ed Haslam, who gave two excellent presentations. Had Ed Tatro, who sat in on the Clay Shaw trial and was one of the source persons for the movie JFK, and also worked a lot with Nigel Turner and the man who killed Kennedy.
Yeah.
We had Roger Stone, also St. John Hunt, and it was very historic. And the thing that happens when you have these conferences is, the researchers, they may have read each other's books and all of that. But when you actually get them together and they can talk to each other and have discussion, you get some amazing learning that happens and some understanding that happens, because I sat and watched one researcher who had been thinking one thing for a long time, but then he was presented by something from somebody else, and he says, well, that might be right. So, because on a lot of the little things, we don't all agree, on everything. But one thing that they all agree on is that Lee Oswald didn't shoot the president. He was a patsy. And it was a coup d'etat that happened in 1963. And we're still living with it.
Everybody who listens to the show is of the age that we remember where we were, what we were doing when we heard that news that shocked the world. I've had most of the people that you named on the show, who attended your conference here on the show, and it always amazes me why, still after so many years, this conspiracy, this cover-up, is still being shoved aside for the findings of the Warren Commission when there is so much evidence to the contrary. Why is that, Kris?
Well, it is because it was such a seminal event in our history.
Mm-hmm.
It changed our country. It was a coup d'etat, even though they tried to deny it. And it has just affected everything. It's affected our trust of our government. It's affected our culture, and it has allowed for my money and my research, a secret societal network, to really gain strong control over our future.
Why don't you take us back to that day in Dallas when President Kennedy was assassinated? And from your viewpoint, based on the research that you have done and the other researchers who presented their information at the first Lee Harvey Oswald Conference, take us as you believe the events leading up to the assassination and after the assassination took place.
Well, before that, I'm going to take just a little aside.
Okay.
Because we are having another conference. It's going to happen in Dallas at the Crown Plaza on Elm Street, just about 3-4 blocks from Dealey Plaza. And that's going to happen November 20th through 22nd. Peter Dale Scott will be giving the keynote address on Friday night, and we'll have some of the same speakers and then a bunch of new ones also. And now I'm going to give you, my overview.
Right.
And I've been looking at it a long time, and I come from I'm an intelligence brat. My father was in intelligence. He got involved in the 30s and was a high level. He was branch chief head of all of East Asia Analysis Office, and went covert for a while for the CIA, and worked in psychological warfare starting in World War II. And he started talking to me in the late 60s. And so I really started to look behind the curtain and study intelligence networks and how they operate. And the Kennedy assassination was done with what I call our intelligence protocols. Okay. And one of those protocols is to misdirect a lot so that the people who pull it off get away with it. And Lee Harvey Oswald was an intelligence operator. He'd been trained in naval intelligence, was on loan to both the CIA and was also working through the FBI, and was also working out of the Attorney General's office. And he was a perfect patsy. He's this a double, triple, quadruple agent who's working for multiple agencies. And in intelligence, you have a lot of that. And you have some agents that don't even know who they're working for. And you had the case of Dick Russell wrote a book called The Man Who Knew Too Much. And it's basically the story of Richard Case Nagel. And he was one of these double, triple, quadruple agents who, is reporting back, and he knew something was going on, and he didn't want to be involved in it. So right before the Kennedy assassination, he went into a bank and took out a gun and shot it up in the air so that he would be in jail when the Kennedy assassination happened, and he wouldn't be involved. Well, when you have these double and triple and quadruple agents running around, you want to find out who's talking to who.
Right.
So you do a thing called shakedown cruises, okay? And you find out who's talking to who. And you had the one in Miami, and then you had the one in Chicago. And the one in Chicago, we know from Abraham Bolden, who was a Secret Service agent, that there was a gentleman by the name of Lee who told them about that plot. And they had a patsy there, very similar to Lee Harvey Oswald. And so you have these shakedown cruises. And according to some of the deepest information, there was an abort team that had been following around, and they thought that it was going to be at a different place, and they didn't get in complete operation in time. Okay. And at its core, when I look at it, because one of the first things my father told me about, he said that Vietnam War was about drugs. There was these secret societies behind it. And he said these secret societies were playing all kinds of games with us. And another thing he told me, he says, about to opiate your whole generation, the boomer generation. And when you look at it from the secret societal standpoint, here's how the secret societies run the world, okay? It's a Leviathan of 3 levels, and each level has 3 parts. The top level is mining, metal, and money. And you think about it, and, you know, it kind of makes sense. If you control the mining where the metal comes from, then you have a good chance of controlling the money that's supposed to be based on that.
Right.
And when I look at Skull and Bones and through my social historian hat, I find that they own a lot of mining companies and mining stocks. And I look at the history of California and Arizona, and you've got Skull and Bones there just scooping up the mineral rights. And then the middle part where it's very active, and they use war as one of the active things is drugs, guns, and oil. And you see, drugs, opium's been the largest commodity on the planet since the 1830s. And they create huge slush funds with these plants that they sometimes sell for more than gold. And they use these slush funds then to buy up all the other companies. I mean, if you had 2 sugar companies, but we don't, there's really only just one sugar company. Okay, but if you had 2, and there was one bringing in cocaine and the other one wasn't, you know, which one's going to be around? And then where this, Leviathan, where this meets the road, where this meets us, okay, it's media, and then movies/music. Okay, they've got to control that. They control the media with all this drug money. They buy up everything, and then the last is quote unquote magic. Okay, and that's the ability to hoodwink us, to make us think something else is happening, and their preponderance on using mass trauma ritual to scare the bejesus out of us. Okay, and that's where the JFK assassination comes in. Okay, because a couple aspects. It happened on Bloody Elm Street, right across from where the first Masonic temple was. And I mean, if you go to Dealey Plaza, and if a person hasn't been to Dallas, you need to go and see Dealey Plaza. It's much smaller than you think it is. And it is built as a ritual kill site. It's got pyramids, obelisks, little ponds, and it's a shape of a trident. And it was the magical operation of the killing of the king. Wow. You can read about it in James Frazier's book written in the 30s, Golden Bough. And you kill the king and you take his power. And especially when you kill the king on a day that has this occult significance of 11/22. Okay? If you read any book about classical numerology, 11 and 22 are your highest numbers in numerology. There's no numbers in between them. There's no numbers after them. And one of their main meanings is mastery and supermastery. So if you kill the king and take his powers, and then you silently flash to the people that you're the master, then, well, if they're the masters, then, we must be the slaves. And if you read about Skull and Bones and the relationship with Hegel, and then if you read Hegel, he talks about this bondage relationship and how to create bondage relationships. And that's what the secret society is trying to do with us, is to have, because the perfect slave thinks he's free.
Right.
Okay. And you see, you kill the king, you smash the archetype. Everybody goes into shock. I mean, you were alive. I was alive. I got called into the principal's office. There was my paper boss. He says, "Hey, come on, kid. You're going out on the street corner and selling newspapers." There's only 2 days they did that. And when I sold I was a paperboy for quite a while. And that was when Kennedy was shot and when Oswald was shot. And I mean, we saw a man get murdered live on TV. I mean, not just me, but a huge percentage of the population. That's trauma.
Yeah.
Okay.
The shock factor.
Trauma. It puts you into shock.
Yeah.
Okay. You smash archetypes, you build them up in a new way. 9/11 is very similar. It was a mass ritual.
Was there a connection between 9/11 and the assassination of JFK?
Absolutely. Same people are involved. There's a great book called Elite Deviance. It's used by some college courses. It's in its 9th edition. And one of the main points it says, gosh, there was, for about 100 years, from 1850 or 1860, 1960, there was a couple big scandals. And then starting in 1960, there was all these scandals, okay? And almost the same institutions and the same people were involved. And these scandals, they create shock waves, okay? I mean, you were alive before Kennedy was shot.
Yeah.
You remember the world that we lived in the 50s and in the early 60s. It was a lot different than the world we live in now.
Totally.
And that was the reason for it, because you see these secret societies, they don't give a fig about the United States, okay? All they're using the United States for is a cat's paw. Okay, using our blood and wallet, okay, to kill the Indians and take the land, okay, because these secret societies are based in Europe with a sister society in China that has a little brother in Korea, okay, and their end game is to rule the world through China.
Why China?
China stands up and says, "We're China." 5,000 years of civilization. Confucius, peace, peace, peace.
Yeah.
Oh. By the way, Kerr, American war dog. Oh, and make sure you send all the remittances to us because we have all the factories. Okay, and George H.W. Bush was our first liaison to China. The first ambassadors were out of Skull and Bones. Okay, and you can look at this from a psychological warfare thing too, in that a big part of this thing is that television screen. It runs at 60 cycles per second. Okay. And where does that happen in this world? North America and Japan. Okay. Because they played Japan in the Japo-Russo War. Okay. And they played Russia too. Kept loaning them, banks kept loaning them money. The same people were selling arms to both sides. Same banks were loaning money to both sides. And then they played them in World War II, where the Japanese did this big operation, collected all this money and jewels and got it all together, but they didn't get to keep it, And it's criminal. But to get back to your question, what happened there? Okay. They got Oswald in position, and he was a patsy. And you had a triangulation, and you killed the president. There was no way you were going to have a wounded president. You had redundancies. And when you talk to assassins, okay, and especially when you talk to assassins that were there, okay, they say walking down the street was just amazing because almost every assassin that they'd ever met in the business was there. And that's one way to control these people, because you muddy the waters, and you put another hand on their shoulder because they aren't supposed to talk. And it's quite insidious, the whole action. It was a huge intelligence operation.
So let me ask you this: If Kennedy wouldn't have been president, let's say Lyndon Johnson would have been president, would Johnson have been assassinated? Was Kennedy a sacrificial lamb on that date and time?
Yes, and for my money, for my money, I see ducks that were put in a row beforehand. Okay. And it, he was built up to be this big Camelot, right?
Yes.
And how was that basically done? That was basically done through Time Life, okay, which was owned by Henry Luce, who's Skull and Bones, and there was a lot of Skull and Bones people there. And they basically, had this psychological warfare plan, okay, to disseminate us boomers, because there's a great book called Generations, A History of America's Future. And it talks about these, and I strongly recommend it. And it talks about these 4 generations. There's a creative, an adaptive, a reactive, and a civic. And the civic generation in the 1860s didn't cohere, didn't come together. Okay. And it was because of assassination and war, and then later on because of opium. Okay, and then best way I can think how to look at it is our society, our social order, our body politic, all of us together. Instead, we're like a 4-stroke engine, but when one of the generations doesn't cohere, we're like a 3-stroke engine. Okay, and especially with the civic one. And so later on, it was those people were little kids in the 1860s when this trauma happened, okay, and then the opium later on. And because of that, these secret societal system was able to do some amazing machinations because we weren't as strong. We lost our republic, okay, and we were pushed into being an empire, away from our Constitution, okay. They had the first big false flag event, the Maine, which is a big report done by an admiral that says, that wasn't blown from the outside in, it was blown from the inside out. But if you study that real hard, you'll see some machinations there that basically has to do with the opium trade. Because, see, after the second opium war in China, opium became legal. And the secret society lost its cash cow. And it took a while, but they fomented the Spanish-American War and sent over Arthur MacArthur as the first military governor, and then came William Howard Taft as the first civilian governor. And he turned McKinley down to be on the Supreme Court. And after McKinley was shot, Roosevelt asked him to be Secretary of War, and he said, okay, his daddy had been Secretary of War, and he'd come back. And Roosevelts were heavily involved in the opium trade. They were ship owners and ship captains. And Delano, matter of fact, was the chief factor for Russell and Company, which is the 3rd largest opium smuggler in the world, the largest opium smuggler in America, and the backer of Skull and Bones for 20 years. He actually made a fortune, came back and lost it in a panic and went back and got another. So they were heavily involved with the opium trade. And so William Howard Taft makes, after McKinley, Roosevelt asked him to be Secretary of War, he comes back, and if you look at the historical record, what did he do? He made opium illegal for the first time in modern Asia, the Philippines. So you needed smugglers, okay? And then he started the Hague and the Shanghai Convention, because the prohibitions have nothing to do with our health, have nothing to do with our children, have nothing to do with our community. They have to do with keeping in place a black market which allows forces out of the shadows to sell plants for more than gold and create huge, big slush funds. I mean, just to give you an idea, from official figures, the United States, they say, has 1 million to 1.2 million junkies. I think there's a few more.
I do too.
And that's, a small percentage of the population, okay? And at 1 million to 1.2 million, that's a ton a day, okay? Now, still according to the official figures, okay, Russia, 5% of their population is using, illegal opiate daily.
Mm-hmm.
The largest percentage is Iran, which is 10%. Still, the country with the largest amount of population that is having an daily opium intake is China. Okay, because they've got so many people.
Right. Listen, Kris, you and I have to take a short break. Please stand by. Great having you with us. Thanks very much for sharing. And do me a favor, Kris, send me an email with all the information about the upcoming event, because I'd love to help you get the word out there.
Absolutely.
All right, stand by, sir. Exonation, my guest this hour is Kris Millegan. He is the publisher and the man behind TrineDay.com. He's also a writer and a musician. Visit him online at TrineDay.com. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Kris and I will be back on the other side of this break as we continue right here from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology. Celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
While science pursues fact, magic accesses the quantum level, bridging random facts to form truth. As long as science and magic remain separate and polarized, the truth cannot be known. I'm Wilda Wiecka. Join me on the Science of Magic radio program dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. During each episode, I'll be speaking with experienced and respected scientists and mystics. From astrologers to astronomers, from medical doctors to shaman, the scientific method to dowsing and intuition, we will weave together information from seemingly divergent practices to promote unity and enlightenment. Join me, Wilda Wiecka, and the Science of Magic right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Jeff Gilson didn't go out looking for adventure, danger, or the answers to most of the controversial political intrigues of the past 30 years. But he found all three when he began investigating the mysterious death of his close friend, Margaret Thatcher's favorite speechwriter. Just an ordinary guy living in a small, sleepy suburb 20 miles outside of London, Jeff's questions provoked a powerful response on both sides of the Atlantic. He was shot at, warned off by the CIA, and formed a close bond with one of Israel's most notorious intelligence officers. Relive Jeff's gripping adventure in his fast-paced book, Maggie's Hammer. Peel away the layers of establishment deception and discover, as Jeff did, that his friend was an assassin with British intelligence, that Great Britain has been America's secret hitman for the past 30 years, and that Princess Diana was not the target in that Parisian tunnel. All of this and more when you visit www.maggieshammer.com and find the link to buying this explosive book online. More and more ordinary people feel they no longer have control of their lives. Jeff fought back. He asked the difficult questions. He set out to redesign his own destiny, and you can do the same using Maggie's Hammer as your guide. Don't waste a moment. Buy it today. Visit www.maggieshammer.com. The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howell expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
Welcome back, everyone. Kris Millegan is our special guest. He is the publisher of TrineDay, www.TrineDay.com, and we're talking about the JFK assassination, going back to October 16th and 18th. To the 18th, there was an event in Louisiana, New Orleans, Louisiana. It was the Lee Harvey Oswald Conference, the first annual Lee Harvey Oswald Conference. And Kris, the secret society aspect, it's so amazing, and it seems to be no longer a secret society thanks to publishers like yourself and the authors that you represent.
Yes, and the internet. I mean, we are in a karmic situation. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're at a situation where, we have the choice. We can stand up and be human beings, or we can kneel down and be slaves.
So let me ask you this, Kris. With all the televised debates of the Republicans and the Democrats and what we think we know about the democratic system, is this all smoke and mirrors?
Well, it's the last really classically trained generation was our founding fathers. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at Johann Wolfgang Fichte in his third address to the German people in 1805, says, we're going to take your children, we're going to teach them what and how and when to take, what to think. And they took the classical education where your number one subject was dialogue, okay, which is different than debate, okay, and where you have a problem and you say, okay, how do we solve it? What do we do? And they found that if they took the classical education, broke it apart, didn't teach you some of it, and took the subjects, taught them for about an hour, and put bells in between. Sound familiar?
Yeah, it sounds like school.
Then they could create a false construct around us and dumb us down. And they have effectively done that. I had a hard time after my father told me some stuff, finding out information, especially on secret societies. Mm-hmm. But then I came across Professor Anthony Sutton's books. And I can't say enough about his America's Secret Establishment and Introduction to the Order of Skull and Bones, because he shows how they very early on took over the education system and then proceeded to dumb us down. And you may have talked to Charlotte Iserbyt. She's written a book called Dumbing Down. And her father and her grandfather were members of the Order of Skull and Bones. And so that was one of their first things to do. And it's, again, they were trying, the boomer generation, they were trying to opiate our whole generation to make us a pieced out, drugged out generation. And they weren't, that didn't happen because it had happened before. And they're trying to do it again, and it's kind of a fail-safe device. The first fail-safe device that our body politic has is known to us as the historical dialectic. Okay, now I kind of liken that to a dark hallway. In other words, you walk down a hallway and you might bump into one side, and then you can bump into another side. Well, you see, that's easily manipulated because, and I say some things that I know are true about secret societies, intelligence agencies, and drug smuggling. Okay. And then I find people that I know that are spooks saying stuff just a little bit more outrageous. It has some bona fides in it, but it has some hinky stuff in it, because by controlling the extremes, you control the middle. Okay. So this fail-safe device can be affected quite a bit. So the next really fail-safe device is this cycle of generations. Well, there's a lot of moving parts in it, and let's say some intelligence. And so assassination, war, and so we kind of saw this, and we jumped aside and created a counterculture. This counterculture was able to survive because in that generation in the 1860s, it didn't cohere. Some of them joined the generation after, some of them joined the generation before, some of them just went out in the woods and did weird stuff. And so, and then we basically cohered as hippies, okay, around a joint being smoked around a circle with a little bit of LSD thrown in, because LSD didn't get really, invented until the late 30s, and didn't really know what it was till the late 40s. And this plan to opiate the whole generation it takes a while to foment these things. And heroin's pretty easy, okay? Here, kid. Try this a little bit, you might like it. LSD, people have intense experiences. It doesn't lend itself to control. Okay. And so they tried to use it, but it basically got out of control. But basically we did cohere as hippies. And what came out of the hippies? The History Channel did a big 2-hour special. And what came out of the hippies was the personal computer and the internet. Okay? So those are the tools we as a body politic, we as a society are using to fight this corruption that these secret societies are doing. Because that's all it is. It's just corruption. It's just people lying and cheating and stealing. And there's a reason why they burn books. And there's a reason why I publish books.
All right, what's the reason for burning them? I know why you publish them.
Well, because they contain ideas, and books are an act of creation. They take on a life of their own.
But, books today, Kris, they're published as well on the internet. So how do they get around to burning the books that are on the internet?
Well, that's a problem. See, like I say, the internet and the personal computer are the tools that we're using, because the personal computer allows me as one person to have a book, allows you to, do a radio show. And then the internet allows us to tell people about it and connect. And it's not just the United States. The internet is the whole world. I mean, I've been on these radio shows, and pretty soon I'm talking to somebody in South Africa, and I'm sure you have too. So,
sure.
it's wonderful what's happening. It's wonderful.
But if these societies, these secret societies, are able to control using television, the media, can't they also use the internet as part of their control structure?
Oh, sure. I mean, Facebook is an amazing facial recognition tool. Okay, but it's also an amazing political device. These are double-edged swords, and again, it gets down to the will of the people. Okay, whether we're going to stand up and be human beings and deal with each other, okay, or just sit around and play silly games. That, at least in my mind.
Sure. When it comes to, let's just get back to the Kennedy assassination for a second here. Who was Lee Harvey Oswald, and what was his involvement in the entire scenario?
Well, he was a spook, and he was a patsy. He was being used. He was being used to spy on people. But then, once the people understand, okay, who this guy is, who he's spying for, then they set him up to use him. Okay. And also, yes, if people want to find out information about the Dallas conference, it's jfkconference.com. Okay.
jfkconference.com.
Absolutely.
All
and it's
right.
November 20th through 22nd in Dallas. And it's going to be historic. We're going to have, they really resist there in Texas, the involvement of LBJ. But when you look at it, there's a great gentleman, and if you haven't had him on your radio, you should at some point in time, because he's getting on in years, Mr. Rodney Stick. He's written a book called Defrauding America, Drugging America, and quite a few other books. And he was a FAA inspector and a pilot. And pilots are very interesting people, because they happen to see quite a bit and just know quite a bit. But he got a gentleman by the name of Trent Parker, who was naval intelligence. And Trent Parker talked about how they had been shadowing Hoover. And they got a conversation between Hoover, Johnson, Dulles, George H.W. Bush, and Nelson Rockefeller. And for my money, that's your main crew. Because, you see, Johnson and Hoover were, if you were in the right position, were so blackmailable that they weren't funny. Okay, I mean, you have them in your pocket. Okay, and then you have Dulles. Well, Dulles is an interesting fella. Definitely been involved with intelligence, and Kennedy had fired him. He was head of the Warren Commission. But he's a lawyer. Okay, now lawyers have clients. Who are Dulles's big clients? The Bush family and the Rockefellers. And you see, George H.W. Bush is a member of the Order of Skull and Bones. And in these secret societies, there are ways to advance yourself within certain levels of the organization. And one of the things that you have to do to advance yourself is to kill somebody. And word on some streets is that Bush made his and one of these people was in your pocket, okay, the day after the assassination, writing this strange little letter that talks about George Bush of the CIA. What's Hoover doing? Well, Hoover's famously known for covering his fanny. And that's what he's doing. He's covering his fanny. He's telling George, but, I know some things too.
Based on the research that you've done, was LBJ complicit in the assassination?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there more than likely were gunmen involved that had direct ties to Johnson. And there is, you have Bar McClellan, who worked in Johnson's law office, who had one of his law partners tell him that. Johnson, if Johnson hadn't been involved with the plot to kill Kennedy, he was going to jail for Billy Saul Estes and other things. And there is just an awful lot that, and if you were going to do it, you're going to kill the president, and you didn't have the vice president on board. Well, I don't think you're very smart.
I agree. Well, okay, so we've talked about, of course, JFK. We've talked about Lee Harvey Oswald. Let's talk about the third player in the assassination, and that's Jack Ruby. Who was Jack Ruby? Was he just a nobody, or was he also part of the intelligence world?
He was in part of the intelligence mob world, and getting back just a quick question quick about Oswald. Sure. Oswald, being a Marine, he joined the Marines as soon as he could, and went into naval intelligence. His family was rubbing up. Some of his aunts had gone out with members of Marcello's, the mob family there. So he was a bridge between both those worlds. And so was Ruby. Ruby was a gentleman who'd been involved in narcotics trafficking, also been involved in gun running, had been busted and done what a lot of people that get busted do, and turned state's evidence, or he worked as a snitch, and he worked within crime families, and Dallas was basically a fiefdom of New Orleans, which has the oldest mafia family in the United States, and so. We've been told by some that, he was, threatened and coerced into the murder of Lee Oswald, because Oswald had to die. He was a patsy.
Right.
What a patsy does in an intelligence operation is just that. You put a frame around yourself and die. And we have testimony from Judith Vernick Baker that, he felt that, he knew that he was getting involved with something like this, and he says, I might just end up somewhere, dead with a rifle in my hands.
Was Bobby Kennedy taken out for the same reason?
Bobby Kennedy was involved with all this. I mean, you have to look at it in a couple ways. I mean, pragmatically, what happened because Bobby Kennedy was shot. Richard Nixon became president, because without Kennedy being shot, there's a big doubt that Nixon would have been president. And Nixon is a whole interesting part of all this, because Nixon is a tool from these secret societies. Because how did Nixon get to be president? There's a book that we published called America's Nazi Secret, the first book from John Loftus that didn't have to go through CIA censorship. And in there he tells a story about how Nixon was a lawyer running around New York at the end of the war, wrapping up Navy contracts. And he opened up a drawer and came across all this paperwork where the Dulles brothers weren't bringing in one or two Nazis, but were bringing in thousands of Nazis. And most of this action was against direct written orders from Harry Truman. They were doing treasonous activities. Nixon then blackmailed the Dulles brothers. Okay, that's how he got into politics and got this sponsorship. It was, you got that, go out there on the internet, you can find the picture of Prescott Bush brimming, young Nixon's hat, because he was sent out to L.A. to give him the money to help him get elected, and then they made him this superstar, the Alger Hiss and the pumpkin and the typewriter and blah 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 blah, and pretty soon, I mean, Prescott is a very interesting guy. Prescott's a very interesting. He's a member of the Order of Skull and Bones and quite a power behind the scenes.
So, Kris, is it safe to say that the shadow government that everyone talks about is actually the Skull and Bones secret society?
Skull and Bones is a big part of it. Skull and Bones is a big part of it. And the secret societies, how they work is they watch. Mm-hmm. They watch, and if they find somebody useful, okay, they'll watch them so that they know the proverbial lawyer's question. You don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. You know how somebody's going to react. Mm-hmm. And we find that the secret government is filled with people out of the secret societies, people that they found useful, pedophiles, and people that have gone through the mind control system. What
about the Clinton family? Are they connected to
lieutenants in the Bush crime family? Basically, your two biggest black operations of the federal government. Okay, which these guys, the secret societal system captured the federal government a long time ago. Okay. And the federal government spits out a lot of money. Well, mm-hmm. They make sure that that money's going into their pockets. I don't know if you've had Catherine Austin Fitts on.
Yep.
But she was Undersecretary HUD or something like that. And she got it down to where we were losing about 90 cents on the dollar, and they got rid of her, and it got back up to $1.70. And all the money was going to these pockets in Texas and in Colorado. And, I got myself off track there.
Hey, listen, Kris, I hate to do this. Our time is up for tonight. I'd love to have you back on in the future to further talk about the great work that you guys do over at TrineDay, and also to talk about what happened at this JFK conference that you're having in Dallas, Texas on the 20th to 22nd. And Exo Nation, if you'd like more information, visit www.jfkconference.com. Once again, Kris, I want to thank you ever so much for joining us. And we look forward to the next time you come here and visit us in the X Zone.
Well, thank you, sir, for having me. And, God bless out there. And when the time comes, stand up, folks. Stand up.
I love it.
Your children and their children and their children, their children, their children, their children will be happy for it.
Kris, take care of yourself. Great talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
Good night now. Bye-bye. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's it for this hour, Exo Nation. I'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Now, once again, if you would like to visit TrineDay's website, they have some great books, www.TrineDay.com. And for more information on the JFK event that is happening November 20th until the 22nd in Dallas, Texas, visit jfkconference.com. The X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. A place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern until midnight, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Rob McConnell. I'll be back on the other side of this news. Don't go away.
Listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology. Celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.